All right, everybody, welcome back to the Creation Liberty Hour. Creation Liberty Podcast, I guess, is the official term for it. This is show number 31 for March 19th, 2012. My name is Chris Johnson. I'm the founder of Creation Liberty Evangelism, where our purpose is to win the lost to Christ and to teach the truth of God's Word and science. We believe God's Word is true and accurate historically and scientifically. We believe in the literal account of Genesis, that the world was created roughly 6,000 years ago in 6 literal 24-hour days, just like the Bible says. And we not only believe that evolution is a dumb theory, but also a dangerous and destructive religion. And if you're watching a recording from YouTube, you can always join us in live chat Mondays at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and that's at creationliberty.com. You just click on the link that says podcast, and that'll take you right to it. And appreciate everybody joining us tonight. We have a few different viewers tonight. And you guys go ahead and post your questions as we go through the show. I will get to those at the end as we have time. Excuse me. Okay. Well, we'll get straight into the topic today. Now, I wanted to first make mention that we do have a new article that's come out on the website, and that's basically asking, is the Green River Formation evidence for evolution? Because I often, every time we ask for evidence for evolution, many times I've had evolutionists message me and say, well, yeah, the Green River Formation obviously proves evolution. It's what they claim one of their strongest, best class of facts in favor of their theory. And it basically says a lot of evidence for their, the Eocene era of their geologic column and all that. So we're going to discuss a little bit of that tonight. Is the Green River Formation evidence for evolution? Well, I'm going to pull up some of my, I'm actually going to pull up the article here for you guys, and let me switch over so we can take a look at that. Now, the Green River Formation, for those of you who don't know what this is, it's right around here on the borders of Wyoming, Utah, and Colorado. There's a huge area. And the Green River Formation, covers a wide range. But they claim, as it says right here, this is from University of California Museum of Paleontology in 1999. They date the Green River Formation at 49 to 50 million years old. So, roughly, it's 49.7 to 50.7, so roughly 50 million years old. That's what they claim it is. And they claim, this is another one from a Geological Society of America that says this is basically the Green River Formation is evidence for evolution. That's what they claim this is. So right here, if you notice the picture right here, this is, now it's not very big, and I guess I should have pulled up some more pictures of the Green River Formation so you guys could see. Basically, why they claim this is such powerful evidence is because most of the world has layers of rock in all sorts of twisted, contorted positions, whereas the Green River Formation actually has layers that are almost perfectly horizontal to sea level, and they only have about a 2% variance on their dip, and you can check that out for I think I put the references on here. Check that out. There's a research paper called the Stratigraphic and Sedimentological Framework of the Green River Formation, put out by Surdam and Stanley, that talks about the variations in that. And now, first of all, before we get into this, before we start discussing why the archaeological finds in the Green River Formation is heavy evidence against the evolution theory. In fact, it completely disproves it, that the Green River Formation can be used for that, and I'll get to that in a moment. But I also want to make mention that of the Polystrate fossils that are found, and these are quite common. I mean, we've had that. I should have brought up some slides, I guess, from some of my seminars. I've covered this before, where you have trees that are running, they're petrified, turned to stone, they're running through multiple layers of rock. Those are absolute evidence that there is no possible way those layers could be millions of years in age, unless you believe that trees will sit there for millions of years and wait for the layers to form around them. Or if you believe that trees grow up through hundreds of feet of sediment hoping to find sunlight when they get to the top. Neither of those is logical, and I've never heard, all the time I hear evolutionists say, oh, we've already answered that one. But nobody ever really does. Nobody ever really gives an answer for that one, and I would certainly like to hear that. I've heard lots of excuses, and I've heard lots of ad hominem attacks, but I've never really heard a scientific answer for that one. But yet, people, even acknowledging those trees, growing up through multiple layers, they still think the layers are millions of years in age. Because they have to, of course. When you believe in evolution, you get stuck inside this box that you can't think outside of. The box becomes the geologic column, which is their Bible. You have to stay inside this box. You can't think outside of it. So anyway, continuing on here, understanding that the petrified trees running through multiple rock layers has already proven that these layers cannot be millions of years in age. They basically think that all these layers you're seeing here, and you're going to find tons of tiny ones. I guess maybe I should explain this. You're going to see tons of these tiny little layers over and over and over going down through it, and they keep calling these annual layers or annual deposition that are forming these layers. That means it takes a year to get one little tiny layer, then the next year another one will come down, and it keeps going over and over. And that's because the area, and now I don't think creationist or evolutionist, nobody would argue that this area where the Green River Formation is used to be a gigantic lake. I don't know anybody that really argues that, because the evidence is pretty obvious. There used to be a lake here. But does that mean that evolution has occurred? Well, that's what we're going to take a look at here. Now let me switch back over so you guys can see this. First of all, I want to point out that according to, and I'll highlight this with my pointer here, as much as it will highlight, this is a paper put out by Edwards and Barden, okay, from the Proceedings of the Royal Society B. This is March 23rd last year, 2011. Depending on when you're watching this in the future, but it's called Infrared Mapping Resolves Soft Tissue Preservation in 50 Million Year Old Reptile Skin. Okay, what they found when they did this experiment, they were digging through and they found fossilized pieces of a lizard. When they did infrared mapping, which infrared mapping is used on using some satellite imagery, they use infrared mapping, but this is a new technique they're using on this, and they discovered that there was soft tissue in this lizard leg it had amino acids in it that had not yet broken down. Well, that serves a really interesting question. It poses an interesting question. How can this rock be 50 million years old and the amino acids have not broken down in 50 million years? I mean, amino acids is that's the building blocks for the proteins in your in living organisms. How is it that they can't break down for 50 million years? Well, I mean, to me, I think the answer is obvious. It should be obvious to a fourth grader that they're not millions of years old. That had to have been deposited recently. Now, it's not like somebody, snuck into the Green River Formation and put this lizard leg in there just to fool somebody. And obviously, how the only explanation you could give, I mean, there's two explanations you could give that I'm aware of for why they would find a lizard leg, soft tissue of a lizard leg, inside rock that's supposed to be 50 million years old. Number one, it's not 50 million years old. Or number two, the lizard burrowed itself into there and left into solid rock and left no evidence of its actions. That would be the only two conclusions you could come to for that. If anybody knows of more, please tell me. And so the evolutionists being stuck in the geologic column, because you see, when I said they're stuck in this box that they can't get out of, that means they have to believe, despite the evidence, they have to believe that rock is 50 million years old. So they would have to believe that this lizard was able to burrow itself without leaving any trace, of how it got in there. Now, I'm sure none of them are going to believe that, and I understand that, but that's what you're forced into. So basically, if you're unwilling to admit to either of those two, then you have to ignore the evidence, which is exactly what I predict the evolutionists would do. You're going to see a whole bunch of ad hominem attacks. For those of you, I've had a lot of Christians who've been following us now, and they're looking at the comments on YouTube, and they're like, wow, I can't believe all the ad hominem you're getting, when you're not calling them names, you're not doing anything like that, you're just presenting the facts. Well, I understand. I don't do that. But them calling names, that's the only defense they have left. I mean, when you take away the foundation of somebody's religious worldview, like we do with evolution here, the only thing they have left to do is to hurl insults and or take majority opinion. They get so mad, you take away the ratings on our videos. We have to have ad populum. It's the only argument we have left. It just cracks me up. But look, the point being is that majority opinion and hominem, it's all logical fallacy, but that's all that's left once you acknowledge the evidence, and so they won't want to acknowledge it, and that's my point. So continuing on here, it's not possible for those amino acids to stay there. But in addition, they find things like this right here. This picture was taken by a guy named with the last name of Grande, Grande. This is fully formed birds, perfectly preserved fossil of a bird in the Green River Formation. Now this is interesting because if you once you read about these fossilized birds and other fossils that you find in the Green River Formation like this, you find that they are running through multiple layers of this rock. How is it possible that those layers of rock be millions of years in age if you have fossils that are running through multiple layers? Anybody got an answer for that? There's only two explanations that you can believe. You either have to believe that, again, this bird was able to burrow itself in there without leaving any trace of its action, or those layers are not millions of years in age. See, and so far, I mean, all the evidence that we're finding so far would match a biblical interpretation. And a lot of, I've read some different creation websites, there's a lot of people that are suspecting, and I would happen to agree with them, that the Green River Formation, there was probably a lake sitting in there post-flood, and that lake drained out. Now I have my own theories about how, because of, I should have pulled up some of that, some of the information. Oh man, I don't know if I can get a hold of it yet. I have a suspicion that part of that lake probably washed out when the Grand Canyon, since Grand Canyon is a breached dam, we covered that on an earlier podcast. Oh gosh, you know what? This is kind of important. I kind of want to get this here. You guys have to be patient with me for a second. I want to try to look this up. Let me see if I can find the image, and I will show it right here. Yeah, here we go. Well, it's possible. Yeah. I don't know whether part of the Green River Formation is part of the lakes that dried up here. Well, I'm just not sure about that one. I'm not going to go into that. I'll show it to you guys here anyway, just what I'm talking about. This is a map that was drawn, and this is by Dr. Walt Brown, and I had to make sure I mention this. It's from his book In the Beginning. I do mention his book commonly when I'm talking about creation evolution issues. I mention his book all the time because he has a lot of really good information there. I reference to his book, that kind of thing. I had one of his, I don't know whether it was a family member of his or something like that, somebody contact me, completely upset. They're like, you didn't reference to his book when you used his picture. Well, it's right there on the screen. I mean, apparently she couldn't even see it, and I referenced it. I referenced to his book. I show pictures of his book. I talk about his work. And basically I'm promoting him, and she was so concerned about copyright. And folks, I think, Christians should be very, and I understand you want to get, credit for some of the work you do and things like that, but most of what copyright is, it's about fame, it's about money. And I think Christians should be, not so concerned so much about copyright, I guess, as long as people are not misrepresenting them. I think what we should do is try to get the truth across, okay? My material is not copyrighted, okay, because I want people to, copy and produce as much as they want, okay? However, if people are going to be misrepresenting me, like cutting and pasting, certain pieces to try to get me to say something that I didn't say, then I'm going to object to that one. But that's not what I've done here. Anyway, blah, 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 who cares? The point is why I'm showing this is that, there's old beach lines that you can actually see in the, and I think I don't have this where you can click on it. I should actually fix that. Get one to where you can click on it, you can blow it up and see it better. But you can see where these old lakes used to be up around this area where the Green River Formation would be up around here. There used to be some old lakes and stuff that drained out when the Grand Canyon was washed out at the breached dam. There's all sorts of evidences. We could go into that. We don't have time to do that today. But we'll continue on here. Let me go back to where we were. I'm also going to bring up the fish fossils that are found. This is interesting. Fish fossils are found running through multiple rock layers as well. Now, first of all, I should also mention with the birds, I guess I forgot to talk about this. With the birds, there was a test done back in the 1970s. I don't have the reference for it right here on the screen. But a test that was done where they actually forced the bodies of freshly killed birds down to the bottom of the ocean and watched them just to see what would happen to them. They decayed extremely rapidly. They aren't going to last hardly very long at all, let alone there's not enough, I mean, the decay was far too rapid to allow for sufficient time for fossilization. So how do you get a fully formed fossilized bird to lay at the bottom of the ocean and sit there for years and years waiting for these layers to form around it? I'm sorry, that's just not logical. If you want to believe that happened, you're welcome to believe that, okay? I don't really care what you believe. You can have all the religion you want, all right? But the scientific evidence is against the theory that this is 50 million years old, the Green River Formation. The same with fish. The fish fossils that are found. I mean, when a fish dies, I mean, something scavenges it very quickly. I mean, you'd be lucky if it lasted for 24 hours. Let alone the years and years they want for these layers to form around these fish fossils. Sometimes they find the fish fossils standing up through multiple layers. That fish did not sit there for many, many years waiting for the layers to form around it. It doesn't work that way. This at the bottom here, this is what they call a coprolite, or that's basically it's poop. That's all it is. It's feces, right? And this is crocodile feces, and this is found in the Green River Formation. Well, obvious question: how do you get coprolites like this to stick around long enough that they're going to let these layers form around it like that? This would have disintegrated long before. I mean, this would have disintegrated in a matter of days at max. I mean, how long do you expect it to sit there? So the continued archaeological evidence that they find in the Green River Formation disproves the theory that the geologists have, or excuse me, that the evolutionary geologists use of being stuck in this box of the geologic column. It just is not going to work that way. So now I also want to go in and talk a little bit about some of the assumptions that are made when they use these dating processes anyway. And a lot of it, they're just dating it based on they have a preconceived assumption that the geologic column is accurate, and that's what they base everything on for how they date things that they find in geological stratigraphy. And I'm going to show you that actually from, let's see here, I pulled this up. Let me see if I can find it again. I'm getting... Yeah, here it is. I had to pull this up again. This is from, let's see here, I'll just switch over so you guys can see this. This is from the Department of Education at Cornell University. And I'll show you exactly what they're saying here. Very interesting. They say that relative dating that they're using in geology depends on two assumptions and one observation. Interesting. Well, automatically, before we even read that, that means most of their theory is based on assumption. They've already stated that. But let's continue and look at what they claim. Assumption number one, they claim right here, is superposition. They say rocks that formed from sediment are called sedimentary rocks. Obviously. This is the kind of bedrock you will find around central New York. And most of these, ranged in layers of strata, blah, blah, blah. And it says, by reference to our common experience with such things as stacks of magazines on the living room floor, we can suppose that in absence of evidence to the contrary. Now, before we continue that, I love how they sneak that in. There is no evidence to the contrary for this. There absolutely is, and we'll get to that in a minute. But taking what they say, referencing to stacks of magazines on the living room floor, we can suppose, that means they can assume, they're assuming that the oldest layers in a stack of rocks is at the bottom and the youngest is at the top. This principle of geological reasoning is called superposition. Now, they even admit this is an assumption, which I find amazing that they actually admit to that. But folks, this is coming from the evolutionist's own mouth. The people who are writing this believe in the evolution theory. Okay, this is not a creationist resource, and they're saying it's based on a primary assumption. They're assuming that the lowest layers are oldest and the highest layers are not. Well, this also assumes, again. This is, to bring up the point that we've covered on different podcasts, and if you guys ever want me to go back and cover some of this stuff, I can always do it again. But we talked about how, hydrologic sorting, you can go into the mall and you can find, one of those little devices, where you flip it over, it has the different color sand in between it, and you flip it over and it's got, it's basically when you flip it, it settles out into layers for you automatically. Here, I'll show you guys a photograph of one right here. This is from my website over our article on geology. This right here, you can see, this is, different color layers of sand that have formed into layers automatically just by how they sort based upon their density in water. And these are different experiments you can do with that. You can get all sorts of different types of sediment, put them in water, and shake it up and set it on the counter. It'll settle out into layers for you automatically. This is how things are sorted when you go to the beach and different things like that. That's how things are sorted. Quite obviously, and we have scientific evidence for that. We have repeatable experiments where we can show how this is done, but yet the evolutionists try to say, well, there is no evidence for that kind of thing. Well, yes, there is. There's repeatable scientific experiments you can do to show that that can happen. So we don't have any, but we don't have any scientific experiments, something repeatable and testable, observable, that we can give to these layers being millions of years in age, slowly being laid down. We don't have any evidence of that. But we do have evidence, scientific experiments we can repeat that can show how hydrologic sorting can sort things. So why do we first assume that the lowest layers are oldest when we have testable, repeatable experiments on how else those can be formed? You see, they just do not want to give. The problem is, if you gave credibility to, okay, even if you just said, okay, well, it's possible they could have formed from hydrologic sorting, even if they say that, it gives some credibility to the Bible. It takes them outside of their box, their geologic column, because if they admit that hydrologic sorting can do that, then basically it can also mean that much of their geologic column can be destroyed by that one fact right there, just from the argument of catastrophism rather than uniformitarianism, which the evolutionist is stuck in the uniformitarian position. Now, continuing on here, it talks about their observation, which basically they say, I mean, you can go through this website and read it. It's at fossilfinders.org. From Cornell University's website. You can read this for yourself if you want. But their observation talks about the fossils. Basically, the fossils are in the rock. That is the observation. I have no argument with that. The fossils are there, okay? But here's assumption number 2. They say correlation. They said when we look at the fossils in stacks of rocks in different places, we make the reasonable assumption. I love how they put the adjective reasonable on there. Let's just call it an assumption for the time being. And they also add in the absence of evidence to the contrary, which is also not true. So we're just going to read this without their bias. We're going to say, when we look at the fossils in stacks of rocks in different places, we make the assumption that layers containing the same fossils in separate locations are similar in age. This is called correlation. That's what they're teaching here, okay? And that's exactly my point. You see, they are dating the layers by what types of fossils they find in them. And I would challenge the evolutionists to explain to anybody how you can tell the difference. You see, because almost all the geologic time eras that they give have limestone to them. There's Jurassic limestone, there's Cambrian limestone, there's Permian limestone, there's Triassic limestone, you name it, there's limestone everywhere. How do you tell the difference between Cambrian limestone, Permian limestone, and Jurassic limestone? Well, the only way to tell is which fossils you find in them, and that's exactly the assumption that they put here. But if you actually watch some of our seminar series or go back to some of our old podcasts, we show from the textbooks what they teach. What they do is they do the exact opposite, or the exact opposite. They basically use circular reasoning. If you say, well, how did you know how old that fossil was? I mean, you're telling me how old you think the layer is by what fossil you find, and how do you know how old the fossil was? Oh, we tell by what layer we find it in. It's circular reasoning. Back and forth. They use the fossils to date the rocks and the rocks to date the fossils. It's a circular reasoning. It's a circular assumption that they make in order to build this geologic column. So what they're saying, I mean, even Cornell University, their Department of Education, they're admitting, from what I'm reading right here, and you guys can go there. I'll leave a link in the comments later on when I get this. If you're watching this on YouTube, I'll leave a link in the comments. You can read this for yourself. And here, I'll even read to you what they said in the paragraph afterwards. Quote, "These assumptions and this observation allow us to construct series of fossils that occur in different layers of rock." What are they saying? That the geologic column is based on major assumptions. They're assuming these things to be true, but yet they don't have the evidence for it. Otherwise, they wouldn't be assumptions, they would be facts. See my point? Even the colleges are admitting, hey, we're assuming this, and the geologic column is built on assumption. And so let me get back to my notes, because we got a few of the things that we're going to talk about here. And let's see here. Yeah, we got to that. And then I also wanted to make mention, because we were talking about how can the layers be forming like they are. There are some places in the world, and the average person doesn't maybe not know about this. There are some places in the world that they find fossils in certain types of rock that they'll date it for, say, like take for example Ian Juby. Ian Juby, if you guys, I'll see if I can leave a link in the annotations here to a link to Ian Juby's YouTube channel, because he has a lot of really good videos. I highly recommend his stuff. He's a man that's much smarter than I am, I'll tell you that for sure. But anyway, he was talking about how he took a trip to Castle Mountain. And Castle Mountain, I'll show you a picture of it. This is in Canada. Castle Mountain, here we go. Let me get this pulled up here. This is Castle Mountain in Canada. And basically what they have found, geologists have found that, basically some of the lower layers of this mountain here are dated at 100 million years old based on the fossils they find, and then the layers above that are dated at 200 million years old. Well, that's strange. How can you have 200 million year old rock sitting on a 100 million year old rock if the evolution theory is true? So what they do in order to explain this, and what they do is they have something they call slick and slides. Okay, what's claimed is that the rock actually slid, the 100 million year old rock over here slid under the 200 million year old rock, and ended up that way. Okay, now with all the, I'm not saying that slick and slides cannot happen, okay, because slick and slides do happen. There's, with all, and especially depending on the location and the topography of the area, and with all the tectonic activity that's going around the world, there's a lot of wacky things that can happen. And so I'm not discounting that. But here I'll show you guys some examples. I forgot I had this pulled up. This is from, let's see here, what's her name? Helena Maloney, I believe. She's a geophysics undergraduate, or at least she was. I think she's probably graduated by now because this was in 2010 when she posted this, or maybe close to graduating, I don't know. But here we go. This is her, with some of her pictures she provided, and I appreciate this. I'll see if I can blow these up here a little bit. I'm not sure if my computer's going to be working. There it goes. I'm going to move this over so you guys can see this. This is one section. It's at about a 35-degree angle, and you can see right here, here and over on the other side. I hope you guys can see all this. I hope I'm aiming this right. You can see here and down through here. There's really smooth rock with scratch marks on it. That's because it is actually the Earth has actually slided across here, and it creates these smooth areas with scratch marks on top of it, which makes perfect sense. And then I'll scroll down. She's got a picture of another one here. I'll show you another example real quick. And right here, this is another excellent picture, and I appreciate her posting these because these are really good pictures of this. This is, you can see it here. It's a little harder to see. I don't know if you guys can tell on the stream or not, but about 60-degree angle, you can see where the rock has slid just like the last time. And right here, there's smooth areas with scratch marks across it. Well, these smooth areas that have these scratch marks across them like this, that should be, anywhere where you have slick and slides like that, you should be able to find these. Well, Ian Juby actually took a trip over to Castle Mountain, and he was up there for hours hiking around. Where they say these slick and slides happen, there are absolutely no smooth areas with scratch marks. He searched and searched, and he's been to, I don't know, probably 7 different locations around Canada where they claim that these have happened. You can find no scratch marks whatsoever. No smooth areas with the scratch marks. There's no slick and slides. So it's okay to have a theory. It's okay to say, okay, well, this possibly could happen. Yeah, it's a possibility that could happen. But the problem is, if you don't find the scientific evidence to go along with it, then why are you assuming it took place? I'll tell you guys exactly why they're assuming it. Because they're stuck inside this box of the geologic column and they can't get outside of it. And I feel bad for them because the evolutionists get stuck inside this box they can't get out of. And so if you don't want to be stuck inside the box anymore, I would say just get rid of the theory. That'll solve a lot of problems. So Ian Juby's got a lot of material in that. I'll put a link to his YouTube channel. You guys can check him out too. Subscribe to his channel if you like those kind of videos. He's got a lot of really good material on that. So then going on to our next point as well. Oh, and I forgot to mention, he did mention that if you're going to, small slick and slides like that can happen, especially during earthquakes and things like that. You have, different sediments that are rubbing up against each other. And they can happen, especially, if you have, the earth drop 40 feet in one area. They have that kind of stuff happen on the San Andreas Fault in California all the time. That certainly happens. But if you're going to have this slide underneath another huge area on top of a mountain for the entire mountain range, you're talking about, that would have to happen all at once to get the even layers like they're finding. That kind of friction it would create on the rock would melt the rock. But there's been no evidence of melting either. I should also mention the Green River Formation. That's another thing I forgot to mention. There's no erosion marks between the layers. You find that on Grand Canyon as well. Where's the part where, you should find areas of erosion in between where these layers have laid, they laid down the sediment. There should have been erosion. If the Grand Canyon was supposed to be laid down layer by layer over millions of years, you think it would rain once or twice in a million years? 2 million years? Something like that? Well, apparently it didn't, according to them, and I don't know how they're going to justify, plant life without the rain. So there's quite a few problems they have geologically with those kinds of theories. And let me go back to my notes again. We had some other things we're going to look at here. Oh yeah, so we had somebody in the chat room, because we had some people join us in the chat room beforehand. There's somebody who was asking about Mary Schweitzer and the T-Rex soft discovery, soft discovery, the T-Rex soft tissue discovery, excuse me. And let me show you some on that, because this is kind of interesting. We'll take a quick look at this video we have on here and see what they're saying about this.
How significant a discovery is this?
Well, it has the potential to be very significant, but for right now, until we do further analyses, I think all we can say is it's really cool.
Well, Professor, as I understand it, this was sort of an accidental discovery. You had to split one of the bones in half because it was simply too big to get into a helicopter, and in splitting the bone, you suddenly realized you had this soft tissue on your hands. Is that correct?
Well, it wasn't quite that sudden. They had to split the bone in the field, as was reported, and when it got back to the lab and Carrie Ansell began preparing it, she reserved some of the fragments for chemical analysis, and so it was treated slightly different than most dinosaur bone is in the field.
Is that amazing to find this kind of soft tissue in a fossil this old, and what can the soft tissue really tell us?
Well, it's very amazing. It's utterly shocking, actually, because it flies in the face of everything that we understand about how tissues and cells degrade.
Now, notice what she said there, and I find that really funny. Now, basically, let me give an overarching picture of what this means. Dinosaurs, according to the evolution theory, went extinct 65 million years ago. If anybody wants to object to that, contact me. I can show you the textbooks teach this over and over and over. It's taught in museums everywhere. 65 million years ago, the dinosaurs went extinct. How is it that soft tissue is not going to break down for 65 million years? I mean, let alone the 50 million year old theory that we just heard from the evolutionists concerning, the Green River Formation. Now we've got 65 million year old soft tissue from dinosaurs. How is that supposed to have not broken down in 65 million years? This is why they said it's shocking. I mean, you can watch. I mean, she's got there's YouTube. You can watch the 60 Minutes segment they did. The show 60 Minutes. It's only about a 15-minute segment on Mary Schweitzer analyzing this T-Rex find that and the soft tissue inside of it. I mean, how are they going to justify that? Now, she still believes in evolution. She still believes in that uniformitarian box. You see, they're stuck in this box that dinosaurs had to go extinct 65 million years ago. So even though the evidence points against that for the soft tissue they found, she still, and every other evolutionist still, has to believe in that. Folks, that is not scientific, okay? That obviously shows their religious fervor for their theory. I mean, it's obvious. Now, but what she said at the end there, she says, well, this, now this makes us question everything we know about the decay of organisms. See what she's doing? She's not questioning the evolution theory, because that, in your mind, you're not allowed to question it. Remember the box? You have to stay in the box, okay? She now has to question, well, maybe things really can not decay for, millions and millions of years. How can you reconcile that in your mind? That takes extraordinary, amazing mental gymnastics and extra imagination for glue to try to piece this together in your mind. And somebody should get these evolutionists an umbrella, because it's raining hard, cold facts up in here. I heard that the other day. I thought that was pretty funny. Anyway, moving on here, and I just wanted to post that real quick. Somebody was asking about that, and that's a really good point, that they're finding that kind of thing. So I wanted to get to, wow, I didn't even realize we've gotten that far into our show already. I want to go back to taking a look at one more thing here. This is something else that came to mind when I was talking about this. And if the evolution theory is supposed to be true, man is supposed to. This is an extra I wanted to add on to the end here, and I'm going to analyze some of the chat room and see if we've got some other questions we can deal with at the end of the show. But if because I had somebody come into our YouTube comments and talking about, they were laughing at the population growth chart when I had showed that, even though I don't know why they were, it was showing that everybody agrees, if you talk to most scholars, they agree there was about 250,000 people on the earth at the time of Christ, around, when the Roman Empire was taking its census about 2,000 years ago. There was about 250,000 people, or 250 million, excuse me, not million, 250 million people on the earth at that time. calculating backwards, you can calculate that 2,400 years prior to that to about 8 people on the Earth. That can be done. And on top of that, the evolutionists claim that mankind, modern man, has been around for 50,000 years at least. And that brings up a few problems. So I want to show you guys this quick video with Dr. Carl Baugh. By the way, Dr. Carl Baugh is just a wonderful man. If you've not met him, I mean, there's all sorts of people that just say the nastiest stuff about this guy. I've met him in person. I've talked with him and had lunch with him numerous times. We were sitting out, gosh, it just, I love to, especially when there's like a bunch of Christians around, I love to get them debating about different topics. I think it's a lot of fun to listen to their answers. And I got him debating on some biblical topics with some other creationists. We had, let's see, who was there? It was Dr. Jay Weil, Dr. Bruce Malone was there from SearchForTheTruth.net, Dr. Ray Bolin, from Probe Ministries, he was there, and we were all sitting down having lunch, and we were discussing this. I was bringing up some topics to get them to start arguing amongst themselves over it, and he just, I mean, Carl Baugh gives some of the best answers, and he's got this just, I mean, because he's getting up there in age, and he's just got this point where he's just got the elderly gentleman, calm and cool and collected. I mean, I love that. I hope I'm that way when I'm older. I'm a little excited and passionate right now. He's passionate about what he does. He's just got this calm, cool attitude about things. Anyway, that blah, 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 who cares? I just really enjoyed my time with Carl Baugh. I'd love to see him again. Would love to go visit his museum in Texas. But we just can't afford to right now. Who can afford to take a trip down there? But anyway, he brought a professional onto the show, a PhD, and I forget what the guy has a PhD in. Trying to see here, I didn't know. It's John Hefner, PhD mathematician. That's what he is. So let's take a look at this video real quick here and see what he has to say about the population for the evolution model with mathematics.
Let's crunch some numbers and see if the evolutionary model is substantiated.
Well, I actually did crunch the numbers. I used the human population growth formula obtained from a pre-calculus math book at Kilgore College, 4th edition by Carl J. Smith, page 200. Anyone could look it up. But here's several evolution scenarios. I took them at their own word, that Homo sapiens been around 500,000 years, and I started with one man and one woman. Now we could have, and probably they think humans evolved simultaneously pretty much everywhere, but as you're going to see, they have
Let's be kind to them.
Yes, they have a numbers problem, so I'm cutting this as much as I can.
Yes.
I'm taking their numbers from their publications here, and the growth rate is under 0.5%. Now, we know that to be verifiable through the data that we do have.
Oh, and I'm sorry, I should make mention real quick. I didn't mean to say 50,000 years. They claim they've been around for 500,000, about 500,000 years. Modern humans have. They only started making, I believe they claim they started making modern day tools and things like that around 50,000 years ago, which there's problems with that too, but that's not what we're discussing right now, so we'll continue here.
Through the centuries, we can't go back very far, admittedly, but it does appear to be under 0.5% average annual growth rate.
Yes.
Worldwide, it's about 1.7, so this is certainly conservative. And even at that conservative rate, you would get that figure that we demonstrated earlier in the program, 2.45 times 10 to the 990th power.
Oh,
clearly wrong.
I hope this audience understands that is light years beyond the number of electrons in the universe, beyond the amount of space available for human bodies in the entire universe, light years beyond that.
That's right.
Possibility. So that's absolutely ridiculous, yet the evolutionary community holds on to that concept of deep roots.
Well, their editors need to crunch those numbers. If they're going to publish those dates, then they need to publish numbers that work.
Yes.
And we know the answer. That scenario is obviously not giving the answer. The answer is 6.5 billion.
So
now,
let's be a little kinder and
well, so I
give them
assumed
more
maybe
swimming room.
let me tweak their data a little bit for them, see if we can get it to work. So I said, well, what about 100,000 years? One man, one woman, I can't cut that figure any.
Right.
And I went 1/10 of 1%.
Oh, that's giving them a lot of slack.
Less than we have ever seen any century for which there's recorded data. Still, you get a number where you're going to have to move the decimal 43 places to the right. And that is obviously wrong. We're looking for 10 to the 9th power right there.
And you have 10 to the 43rd
10
power.
to the 43rd power.
Not enough space on planet Earth.
Not enough space, and certainly not what we know to be true through census.
Right.
And incidentally, if that were true, then where's all the bodies?
Oh, yes.
You couldn't till your garden without hitting skeletons. And so finally, evolution scenario 3, what if we just go 25,000 years ago?
I mean, be incredibly kind.
I don't think any of them would truly accept that. They'd push it back at least a little bit. But I said, well, let's just see what the independent computer calculator is going to give us, because we're just crunching numbers. There's no bias in a calculator of any kind. 2 plus 2 is 4 for anyone.
Yes.
So starting with that, 1 man, 1 woman, and an annual growth rate less than we've ever seen recorded still gives 1.44 times 10 to the 11th power for the population. Now, some may be tempted to say, well, you got an 11, that's close to a 9. Must be getting close. No, that's actually 144 billion. We've got 6.5 billion. That's 22 times our present population. That's 22 Earths worth of people.
Yes.
So the only conclusion I think you can academically say is, well, none of those scenarios worked.
The evolution of humans did not occur.
Exactly. So now, to be fair, let's test the biblical scenario. Yes. Starting about 4,500 years ago, after this big death event, which we know historically, if the Bible is to be believed, it was true, it did happen. And with the 4 husband and wife units on the ark, that's 8 human beings, and an annual growth rate of under 1/2 of 1%.
Yes.
We know, tracing the
very realistic.
The Jewish line, they've averaged about 0.44% throughout recorded history, and the whole world has been about that same rate, under 0.5% average. That would give a world population of 6.5 billion. Well, that's what I call a bullseye.
That's right.
Yeah. So I mean, this is the point: is that what he's doing, he was being incredibly lenient for the evolution theory, and it wouldn't work out in any of the calculations, okay? And you go through this video, I just said, I want to see what some of the comments on this kind of video are. All it was, people, the only things I saw in there were ad hominem attacks. That's it. They were saying, oh, well, this guy's stupid, or he fails at math, or something like that. That's all they were giving. There wasn't any logical explanation for this kind of thing. And so the population growth charts, I mean, even though they're, they won't even laugh at the ones I put up there. Well, you're welcome to laugh at it, but you need to, I mean, what's really laughable is the evolution model in light of the population growth charts. You want to just say that the human population for hundreds of thousands of years just stayed at a steady level. There was no improvements whatsoever. If you want to claim that, you are claiming that on pure speculation, nothing more. There is no evidence for that kind of thing. And even if you go back that far in time and you want to say that that many human beings existed for hundreds of thousands of years, where are they? Should we not see a lot more humans in the, dug up in the dirt? I mean, if fossilization is supposed to happen so rapidly as the evolutionists claim, where are all the humans? And I think we're not finding enough of those for what the evolutionary theory claims for the population growth chart. So we had some questions from our chat room. I wanted to get to one of them because I think we answered a couple of them already. But somebody that was asking, let's see here, they were asking, I was trying to find where that was. Yeah, they were asking about, what if evolutionists try to say, this was the, let's see here, the 7/6's guest we have in here. He says, what if evolutionists try to say that this new discovery proves to soft tissue can survive for 65 million years? And that was referring back to the Mary Schweitzer video that I just showed. And that's what I answered earlier, was that, of course they're going to say it survives for 65 million years because, remember, they're stuck in that box. You can't get out of the box. You have to stay within the geologic column. You have to stay within uniformitarianism, and that's a problem. But he said, won't someone in the scientific community recognize this as absurd? Oh, yes. There are many in the scientific community that will recognize that it's absurd. However, they're not going to do it on camera, and they're certainly not going to do it on paper. See, because if you claim that that's absurd, you're going outside the box of the geologic column. If you leave the geologic column, you're excommunicated from the evolutionary world. Okay, you have to understand that the evolutionary community, with grants and book deals and everything else that they've got, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. You are excommunicated from that religious faction if you dare question the geologic column. So Mary Schweitzer, the only reason she was even brought on for these amazing discoveries was because she didn't question the geologic column, despite her her discovery absolutely disproved their theory that these bones could possibly be 65 million years old, or more, depending. So anyhow, I think that's all we got for the questions for today, and I think we're about out of time. And I hope you guys enjoyed that, got a lot out of it. Make sure to subscribe. If you guys haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel yet, we still have more videos coming out every week. And this Saturday, we need to make this note. For next show is not going to be on Monday. Next show is going to be this Saturday, March 24th, we're going to have Tony from Australia. He's going to be joining us. We're going to be discussing evolution and morality. He agreed that he wanted to discuss that. He came onto some of our YouTube videos and kindly left some of his comments. And he said that evolution does have a justification for morality, he claimed, and he wanted to discuss that on our show and has agreed to come on. So I appreciate him doing that, and we're looking forward to that. That's going to be Saturday, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's going to be about midnight for him in Australia that night, because they're 14 hours ahead of where we are here. So he's kindly agreed to come on and do that, and that's going to be exciting, so I'm looking forward to that. So make sure to join us this upcoming Saturday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for Creation Liberty Podcast number 32. Until then, I hope you guys will continue to study God's Word and study science and find out how the scientific evidence actually proves that the Bible is correct in everything that it claims. And I hope that our Lord Jesus Christ will bless you guys as you do that. And you guys take care. We will see you guys next time. Thanks a lot.